Hi.
Hi. Hi, Skye.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me in your gorgeous hotel suite.
Thank you for being here.
We're at the Dorchester today.
Yeah.
So why did you pick this hotel?
It's a very beautiful hotel. It feels very quintessentially London, and very oddly, my father was born here. So I kind of feel like I've always sort of rather romanticised.
Wow. I don't
little
think
bit.
many people can say that they were born at the Dorchester.
No.
That's fantastic.
He was born here apparently during the Blitz.
Okay.
And at the time they thought that the Dorchester was bomb safe.
Okay.
Something to do with reinforced concrete or something like that. It turns out actually it's not actually bomb safe, but
Oh.
it didn't get hit. But that's why he was.
Oh, a lovely family story. And as I was saying off camera, this has to be my favourite room service order we've had yet, because this is what I would order.
This is I don't want to say this with too much arrogance, but I do think that a club sandwich and fries is basically quintessential room service. That is what room service is all about.
So obviously everyone knows that you had this incredible childhood growing up in Venice and your time was split between the UK and Italy. That must have enormously sort of shaped how you approach, well, not just the way you cook, but like life, I suppose. Like, what things have you taken from both cultures, would you say?
Well, I do feel lucky. I think when you're kind of from one place and grow up in another, you get to pick and choose a little bit.
Yeah.
So I do feel quite lucky. I feel like I never feel, when I'm in England, I feel incredibly not English and quite Italian. And then when I'm in Italy, I suddenly feel incredibly British. So it's sort of a funny one, but definitely love of food. I mean, I don't think you can kind of grow up in Italy and not love food. And one of the things that I love, I mean, beyond the deliciousness of Italian food, I'm just very greedy and I like eating Italian food. But also just the Italian attitude to food, I think is a really special one. It's somehow manages to celebrate it, but also be incredibly relaxed at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think what I love about how people feel about food in Italy is it's such a universal thing. The assumption is that everyone will love food, that everyone's interested, that everyone cares, that everyone wants to eat well, and everyone does eat well. Whereas I think in Anglo-Saxon culture, we sometimes kind of get our knickers in the twist a little bit and overcomplicate things, or can kind of assume that not everyone loves food, you know, that it somehow it's like a hobby being into food, whereas actually it's just a basic human
I've never thought of that, but that's very true, isn't it? I think when I sort of even think to my own friendship circle, there are kind of people that would associate themselves as like, I'm a foodie, I enjoy cooking.
Everyone loves eating.
Yeah.
Everyone loves, well, they, you know, if they don't, I'm sure they do. They just probably don't have the happy associations with it for whatever reason, or maybe aren't eating so well. And cooking, I think, is a more complicated one because people get anxious about cooking and they think that they can't do it, or they think that it takes up a lot of time or whatever. But I think, again, that if you kind of really pare it back, it's so much simpler than we've built it up in our minds to be. And it's such a simple source of joy. Like you can kind of make other people so happy so easily when you even just make them beans on toast, or what, you know, toasted, you know, hot cross bun or whatever, like whatever it is. It's really easy to kind of, I guess, show someone that you care, but also just to give them something really lovely that's going to make them happy.
Obviously, you have this amazing homeware collection that you've launched, and make sure I'm pronouncing this right. So it's Tavola.
It is beautifully pronounced.
Thank you. I've been practicing.
Beautifully.
The Aussie in me, so I had spent a lot of years in Australia, wants to say Tavola.
A lot of people want to say Tavola.
Okay.
And I think Tavola sounds quite good as well.
Yes.
But Tavola is the Italian word for table.
Okay.
And so that's where I kind of, that's what I call, because I think there's just the table is the heart of everything. Yeah. For me.
It's the show, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what I love about you so much is not only your association with sort of cooking, but also the whole ceremony of it, and just
ceremony of it.
Just making even the simplest of, birthday breakfasts that don't have to be an expensive affair, but dressing the table and putting care and love into the whole experience.
I love doing it, and it brings me joy, and I hope it brings those around me joy. But also I just kind of think it's quite nice because I think we have a tendency to think of cooking or hosting as quite a sort of rigid formula, and then you think, oh, I don't like doing that, or I don't want to do that. But there's always going to be bits that you enjoy. So if you actually really don't enjoy cooking because you do just feel anxious, or it makes you feel uncomfortable, or you don't have time, there are other ways you can kind of, like you say, get that same effect.
Yeah.
Maybe you actually do quite enjoy like laying the table and making it look a little bit kind of special in some way, or getting creative with that. Maybe that is your joy, and then you can order Deliveroo, order pizza and have a pizza party, or whatever your thing is,
scrape it out into a nice dish.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, and bring it out.
Yeah,
and I don't think there's any shame in that. You can pretend you made it, or you can not pretend you made it. I think either way, it doesn't really matter. The end result is you're all gathered together to have a meal that feels special, and you're finding a way to kind of convey that and set that tone and set that mood.
So was that the inspiration behind the collection?
It was, absolutely. Like for me, it's a lifelong dream to have my own tableware collection. But part of that is it just felt like it is the missing piece in the puzzle. I love having friends over. I love hosting. It's my favourite thing to, given left to my own devices, if I would happily never reply to an email again and just live in a perpetual state of having friends over for breakfast, lunch and supper every single day, I'd just be so happy. So my happiest place is kind of around the table, and part of making that happen, bringing that to life, is the cooking, but a big part of it is also just kind of the zhuzhing, as I like to call it, the zhuzhing. I do love a bit of zhuzhing. And actually, if you have a really pretty serving dish and you put some nice fresh tomatoes on there, and some good mozzarella, drizzle of olive oil, a couple of basil leaves, actually you have something really beautiful that they might serve you in some of the best restaurants. You happily go to the River Cafe for that. So I think that that they're part of this. The tableware is a part of the story.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
So in terms of designing the pieces and sort of choosing who was going to create what was in your mind and the colours, like how involved in that amazing creative process have you been?
So we work with artisans near Venice mostly for the ceramics. So there's this town called Bassano del Grappa, which is basically a town that makes ceramics. And there are quite a few sort of largely family businesses there that make all sorts of ceramics, but a lot of them is kind of quite rather like ours, are sort of often with sort of 3D carvings and mouldings to them, which is a very sort of traditional, quite old-fashioned Italian thing. So I went there. I knew about the town. I had a lot of pieces from there and kind of built relationships with them, and they now make pieces for us. But everything is hand painted, so it's quite nice. So quite a lot of flexibility with what we can. What we can do, and in terms of design for the individual pieces, often take inspiration from I'll buy a vintage plate from a flea market or something, or I'll have one in the cupboard that I've had for years that I absolutely love. So I'm not a designer, but what I can do is I kind of go and then I'll say, okay, can we do a version of this that's dishwasher friendly? Because my beautiful vintage plate, which I've only got one of because I can only find one of, I don't want to put it in the dishwasher because I know that it will wear away the paint over time.
So your collection is dishwasher safe.
It is dishwasher
That's a really
because that's quite important for me, because if you're cooking for 20 people, and I love doing that, but the bits I probably don't love are kind of like washing up afterwards. So so we make kind of versions of dishwasher friendly, and then I might say, well, I love this like flower and I'd love to have something like this, but could we maybe do it in a pink, or can we make it a little bit more informal maybe, or like whatever it is, we want to play around with the designs. One of the things that I kind of love about life in Italy is it's full of these moments. And another moment was aperitivo moment. And so I'd often go and meet up with friends, when I was a bit older, like 16 or whatever. We'd go and have an aperitivo around 6 o'clock. have an aperitivo, and then everyone would go home and have supper with their families.
Aww.
And then if anything, if it was a weekend or whatever, you would meet again after supper around 10:30 or something and go for like after dinner drinks or go clubbing or whatever it was. And so there's just like, they're so precious, these moments in our day, and kind of celebrating them and just making them sacrosanct. And kind of, you know, my parents were English and they had slightly different attitudes. It was sort of fascinating that, you know, my friends, my peers, you know, they wanted to go, like, they didn't want to not have lunch with their family or not have dinner with their family. Just kind of so lovely.
I think we should campaign to bring that into
the Anglo-Saxon culture.
To the Anglo-Saxon culture. I will certainly get on that bandwagon with you. That's one thing. As a family, we always come together at meal times, and my kids might roll their eyes because they want to carry on playing whatever, or, you know, but I enforce it, and I hope that in years to come
they will. By the time they're teenagers, they absolutely will kind of be craving that time.
But this aperitivo, as you say, that is magical because, you know, it's more about friends and family rather than just family.
It's about friends, exactly. That's like your friends' moment. Yeah. And when you kind of bring everyone, it's a fun moment as well. Oh. But definitely, like, for the collection, I really thought about it in the same way as I guess I think about my books, which is hoping to take quite a problem-solving approach to it, because I love, you know, all of this comes from the fact that I just love having people over. Mm. And I taught myself to cook from cookbooks, and I built kind of my own collection of plates and bits and bobs that I use over time. And through these kind of mistakes and lessons, I kind of feel like I know what has helped me find it easier. So, you know, I've learned, as beautiful as that plate is, if I can't pop it in the dishwasher, realistically, it's not going to make me want to do things more often. And then other small things, you know, all our glasses is you know, they're either tumblers or quite short stems. They're all quite sort of like, I don't love a towering wine glass on the table, because I kind of think it just makes it feel quite restauranty. It makes it feel overly formal. It messes with kind of the proportions and things that we do. Bud vases, because I love flowers, but I know how expensive they are, and I know that every time I'm doing a supper party and it comes to actually buying the flowers, I'm a bit like, oh my god, that seems, you know, that seems crazy, and it is of course getting worse. So, but actually a few bud vases, they're not a sort of bottomless pit that you need loads of flowers to fill them. Actually, one or two flowers, it's a lot more affordable.
Or herbs.
Or my new obsession is dried flowers.
Yes, this is a thing now, isn't it?
I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I've adopted Thanksgiving, as a side note, I've adopted Thanksgiving as a sort of holiday. I'm completely obsessed with it. And I did a big Thanksgiving dinner for 25 friends or something for Thanksgiving this year. And I wanted to do the table. And of course, that time of year, now we're in spring, moving towards summer, there are lots of lovely flowers, and it's all, but kind of in the winter there really is nothing. And so actually I just went and I bought heaps and heaps and heaps of dried flowers and did them down the table, and they look really lovely, and you keep them forever, so you can kind of keep reusing them. So I think you don't mind as much spending lots on it, and very sustainable and really beautiful. And then you can have them in different parts of your house the rest of the time. And then actually I ended up tying them in little bundles and using them as some ornaments on my Christmas tree. So I felt very like, it was quite, but if you're getting lots of use out of something, then you're happy to kind of invest in it.
You say you're sort of self-taught, but you obviously have this intrinsic sort of eye and creativity running through your veins. Like, it's very clear. And, you know, I think one of the things you just said really resonates with me. It's that sort of trial and error.
To me, that's all trial and error. And I, as adorable as you are, and kind of you are to suggest that I have a sort of a creative streak, I don't think I do. I think we all do this. I think we all do. Same as we all like eating, we can all cook, and we can all do. It's just having the time and I guess the interest to play around and make those mistakes, and then kind of be like, oh, that didn't work so well, I want to do it this way. And none of it really is a mistake. It's just frustrating. It's just, you know, you do a supper party and you've chosen to make cheese souffle for sort of 12 people, and the whole thing is deeply stressful, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to do cheese souffle next time, I'm going to do a roast chicken.
Do you have any sort of dinner party disasters
so
that you have
many
to dial out?
So many. I think you just, what is it, Julia never explain, never complain. Kind of, was it the Queen? Like, I think you kind of got to channel that.
Yes.
And I think Julia Child also famously was kind of like, never apologise. And I have, because I'm British, such a tendency to kind of be like, oh, you've just stepped on my toes. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I was in your way. And my husband is the one who's like, don't apologise ever. It just makes your guests feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So what if it's a bit burnt? Like, we
and
can
often they wouldn't notice.
I think that's the thing. You draw more attention to it. And I think the other thing that really is worth remembering is you have in your mind how it's meant to be. No one else knows that. No one else knows that you were meant to have, you know, some delicious roasted leeks with your supper, and actually you forgot them in the oven and they're burnt to a crisp, and you're just gonna leave them there and pretend they didn't have. No one else knows. And even, you know, pudding doesn't work out, you just do like some fresh fruit or ice cream. I mean, you can do things. You can have a backup plan.
That's always my backup.
Everyone loves it.
Yeah.
So keep a freezer well stocked with ice cream.
Yeah.
The other one that I quite like with ice cream that everyone goes wild for, and actually I learnt this from a friend of my mother's, and she always incredibly chic dinner parties, and you just bring tubs of ice cream to the table, in the tubs, and cones, and then you can do like a little tray like this if you want, with maybe some sprinkles or chocolate flakes, all the sort of yummy things, a bit like room service that as grown-ups you don't have many opportunities to eat, and people assemble their own ice creams, and it's so fun and everyone goes wild for it.
I think you are the first doctor that I've had sat next to me on bed. So I did my research, my love. I'm fangirling even more. Like, that's incredible. You are a doctor of, is it classics or
classics? With the classics factory. I'm not a doctor of anything actually useful, but my PhD was in 17th and 18th century English translations of Latin love poetry.
Just your average,
which was such a conversation killer. When I was doing, I loved it, and I loved my time, you know, I obviously loved it, and I loved my research, and but you kind of go out to dinner and someone politely asks you, what do you do? And I'm studying, you know, researching at the moment for my PhD. Oh, and they politely say, well, what's that in? And then you kind of tell them, and then there's this like really awkward silence. There's this sort of big glass out dull. But I loved it, and I found it fascinating. And in some ways, I mean, of course, what I do now is completely unrelated. But it does sort of in some ways shape, I think, how I approach things and how I think about things. And my last book, actually, A Table Full of Love, was this idea, the premise of the book is that every time we cook, even when you make someone a cup of tea and toast, it's an expression of love. And then I explored through the book the different kinds of love that we feel and how we articulate that through foods. There's like a chapter on date night food and more romantic love, or you know, friendship and recipes more sort of for comfort food, or family love, familial love, and recipes to cook with your kids or what have you. And so the premise behind that was this idea of quite a sort of classical, you know, in the ancient world, they had different names for the different kinds of love, whereas now we just say love is quite a sort of generic term that could mean anything. You kind of, you love your husband, and I love fries, and I love my kids, and I love my friends, and I love going on holiday. And actually those are all quite different emotions, really, but we just use the same word. So I was trying to play around with that. So in some ways I still kind of use my degree.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you say it's unrelated, but I was like, it's obviously informed your process. And in terms of your writing and your column, and, you know, you've written for various magazines, and you've obviously got several successful books, which are fabulous. What does your writing process look like? Because I know that's vastly different for a lot of people.
It's terrible.
Okay.
For any aspiring writers out there, do not do what I do. I'm an incredibly slow writer. I mean, it varies slightly. So I write a weekly Substack, which I absolutely love and is really fun. And I really enjoy doing that. And that's much more informal, and that is more kind of a stream of consciousness. So I'll have a thought or cook something that I've really particularly like, and then I'll relatively quickly write about it and share it. Of course, sometimes you think, oh, I want to tackle a topic, and then that takes more time to research it. But that's sort of more of a sort of stream, more. I like to think of it as like writing an email to a friend, you know.
Okay.
Or a letter to a friend. And then, but for the books, that's or whenever I might be commissioned to write a piece on something that isn't sort of so spontaneous. It's quite a process, and I'm a really, really slow writer. So typically something for a book, if I'm working on a book proposal or working on the book itself, I'll read everything that I can find on that topic. I'll buy all the cookbooks. I've just finished writing. I mean, it comes out later this year. It comes out in October. But I've just finished a cookbook on Christmas, Christmas.
Wow.
Which was so much fun.
For that one.
So I use it as an excuse. I bought all the Christmas cookbooks. I genuinely don't. I mean, there must be ones out there that I didn't buy and read, but I couldn't find them. Okay. I went quite far back. I bought a lot of vintage ones. I bought American ones. Anything anyone mentioned, I would ask everyone, what's your favorite? If you have one Christmas cookbook, what is it? I got them all. Read it all. Try and kind of absorb, and then put that away and take out either my laptop or a pad. Actually, I still basically do it in a notebook, and I'll figure out what my chapters are and almost plan an essay.
So kind of storyboard it in a way.
Storyboard it. And then I'll start actually writing it. Okay. And then that process is I'll take that sort of essay plan, as it were, to kind of write my chapter or whatever it is on my laptop, and then I will go back and edit it. And very rarely is there much overlap between what I actually started with.
I mean, how do you overcome things like writer's block or imposter syndrome or all these things that we can be plagued with?
So I permanently live with imposter syndrome. Permanently. But I think the more I chat to friends or other creatives, I think that's quite common, especially amongst women. Men don't seem to be quite as susceptible to it, although I'm sure they are, but maybe not as badly. I just try and park it in a corner, and I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it. It does work. Yeah, is the crazy thing. And also just reminding that everything is a learning process, and I feel as though I really grew up with this feeling, and it's hard for me to shift, but I'm working on it, that you need to be perfect at something. You need to be perfect at something before you share it. And I'm trying to think more that actually things can be a sort of creative process, and you can bring people in on that. That's why Substack's been great for me, and I love it, because it's nice. When you work on books, it's a very slow process. You're years thinking about it. It gets commissioned. You're a couple of years writing it and doing the design before people actually read it. And then often, you're not with them in their kitchen whilst they're using it or whatever. So of course you get feedback, but it's quite delayed. And whereas something like Substack, I will write it, I post it straight away, and then you have an opportunity to kind of start a conversation. So that's really lovely. And for a long time, I kept on thinking, I should write a Substack. I'd love to do that. And I had in my mind that I almost needed sort of a year's worth of content already there. And actually just being forced to just put it out there and keep working on things is very helpful for me with that imposter syndrome sort of.
Well, therein lies the magic of it as well. And I think people really respond to that because it's imperfectly perfect, and it's, authentic and in the moment.
Often the hardest bits of a piece, an essay, a book, whatever it is because there's so much pressure on the first lines, because we're all conscious that, I'll go to a bookshop and I'll pick up a novel that looks good, and I'll always read the first couple of lines, and you kind of know instantly whether you're excited to go on reading or not go on reading. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to love the whole book or not love the whole book, but there's a feeling that you get. And so I think we're all conscious of that as writers, and we know how much pressure there is on that introduction. So sometimes you always need to write the piece and then kind of go back and rewrite it, but you obviously need to start somewhere. So I find that quite helpful.
Do you know?
So sinecure, but
my mind just went on a tangent as you were speaking, and I of course was listening, but I was thinking about the opening lines of books, and they say that the most famous opening line of a book ever is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
How does it open?
Oh gosh, it's something like, last night I dreamt I went to Mandalay.
It is, you're right.
Yes. Well, that gives me goosebumps because you know what comes.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful, and it's so
there's a lot of pressure.
Average words.
Yeah,
but it's so intriguing.
So intriguing.
And it's I don't know my English teacher, I know she watches this and I love her to death. We still keep in touch. But she'll tell me off not knowing the phrase here, but it's the order of the words. So she could have said, I went to Mandalay last night.
Less impactful.
But it's just, that's conversational. But to say last night I dreamt I went to Mandalay, it's just so romantic. So doing a full kind of turnaround here, that brings me back to the Italian language. Like, it's a poetry in itself, and they can say anything and it sounds sexy. And
it's true.
They're all born artists and
it is
poets.
A beautiful language. All language. I mean, that's what I loved about my PhD that's how I got into this translation in a way, is this idea that just the power of words.
So I want to end with my 3 questions, my 3 special questions that I like to ask everybody. So I'm interested on your take. And I want to know if you could summarise one thing that frightens you or you're fearful of.
Yeah.
One thing that inspires you, and your legacy, what you'd want to be kind of known for, remembered for, which you kind of touched on a second ago. But
gosh, what scares me? I'm quite a scaredy cat, so a lot of things. I won't give you the full list. But
hotels that don't serve club sandwiches.
Yes,
I'll be one of them.
Definitely. I am quite a scaredy cat. I mean, what ultimately, really, I'm quite controlling. I like to. I'm not great when I don't feel in control to some degree. And I think generally I find that quite scary. I think kind of big things like the world going to war.
Yeah.
Which feels
We're not alone there.
It genuinely, or illness, accidents, that sort of thing.
Okay, so
I spend more
I see what you mean when you say things that are, so it's not necessarily controlling a situation like your daily schedule, it's more big events that are beyond your control. Your inspiration.
My inspiration.
Seems like there's many.
There's many. There are many. I mean, books.
Oh, yeah.
I love reading. Yeah. I love looking at books. Just always just looking for things. Friends. I learned so much from my friends, both in terms of practical things, but also just how they live their lives. And this idea of if I can't control the bigger things, just trying to craft a beautiful life for myself. And that sounds quite obnoxious, but I do care about that, and we all make our choices, and just trying to make my day to day, ultimately, because that's all you really have.
Yeah. So
I probably do think less big picture, and I think more kind of how can I make today feel like, how can I have a good day today? How can I want to wake up and I don't always succeed at this. I have your moments, but try and proactively think how. This is my day today. How can I make today a good day? And sometimes terrible things happen.
So is that what you want to be known for? Is that your legacy then?
Some version of that.
Making the ordinary shine.
Yes, I would. I mean, if I were to be known for that, I'd be thrilled. I mean, I think basically anyone having... and also if I could bring even a tiny bit of the amount of joy that I've derived from my favourite cookbooks into others' lives, into other people's homes, that would just make me incredibly.
Well, you've done it for me.
Oh, I feel so
at the risk of sounding, sycophantic. You've very much done it for me. Can't wait for the next one to come out for Christmas. Oh my goodness! So. We're talking Skye McAlpine styling and recipes and storytelling, but in a Christmas.
It's everything Christmas. So it's lots of recipes, but also practical advice on how to do your menus, how to plan things, how to wrap your presents, how to do your tree, how to do your table, how to make crackers, how to make an advent calendar. I mean, it's kind of everything Christmas in a book. I'm obsessed. You might not know, but I'm obsessed with like Christmas for me is the pinnacle of kind of everything that we've been talking about. It's it's so much happy, like so much happiness. My husband always teases me. He's like, "There's always tears at Christmas," and I say, "Yes, there are," because I just get so excited and so sort of overwrought and so sort of like a child. The whole thing, that inevitably there's a moment when I sort of have tears, and that's just even that is just part of the happy cycle that is
the
Christmas.
Expression, it's the passion,
it's just the excitement of the whole thing.
Well, I can't wait. I will be the first to be ordering that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.